Before I begin, as of 26th of February, more than 150 Ukrainians have already been killed. Chernobyl has already been occupied, and a tiny island has just been snatched, while a missile was apparently launched on a Japanese vessel in the Black Sea, subject to verification, of course. As of today, there seems to be an offer of negotiation, but handed this yellowed piece of paper, now yellowed piece of paper, of research done by the University of Reading in UK, and she wanted me to pursue this as I was working on ecological impact assessment and anything to do with sustainable development. And I did not want to pursue this because although my subjects are astrophysics, physics, and ecology and sustainable development, this was not necessarily my field of interest. I wasn't keen on it. Maybe I should have pursued this. Well, since it does involve everything to do with the planet and the impact will affect the entire planet. See, we keep on forgetting that we are a closed system and we're all on one piece of rock hurtling across the universe along with a system of planets that are going around a star, and we've forgotten where we are, and we've forgotten what sort of an impact we're causing on our one home. There's no other Earth that we can go to right now. So as you can see, on the left hand side, that's the North Pole, the Arctic. On the right, there's the South Pole. Now the Arctic is very close to human habitation. And whatever happens on the Arctic impacts the temperate zone. Whatever happens on land where we've inhabited impacts the North Pole very closely. So I'm giving an excerpt from my article, Everything North of 55-degree latitude. Ukraine is just below 55-degree latitude. To assume that bombing that tiny nation is not going to impact the 14 countries listed above, which are USA, that is Alaska, Canada, Greenland, Iceland, Scandinavia, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Latvia, Estonia, Russia, Lithuania, UK, Switzerland. And those immediately below and around would be tantamount to the ultimate form of stupidity displayed by the decision makers of the 21st century. The long-term consequences of this display of child's play by two giant bullies on a third person's land is far greater than is being made obvious by these in the mainstream. Take for clarity the example of the sinking permafrost in the temperate region. This has now been a well-researched major environmental issue for more than a decade. Alaska is already losing its coastline, and original American villages are already being forced off their established villages. Their alternative land allotments haven't been completely sorted out yet. Meanwhile, in Russia, Siberia in particular, the sinking permafrost isn't the only problem in the region that has been displacing Russians themselves. The phenomenon of exploding sinkholes already exists out there. Pockets of methane have been exploding massive craters into the Earth's crust, and this has been researched since around 2014. The frequency of these sinkholes appearing has increased and has been on the increase steadily. With a pockmarked crust that is ever thinning, if common sense ever prevailed, one wouldn't want to bomb it into oblivion. That is as good as mass suicide. If the show of artillery by two apparent superpowers is to cause inflation in goods exported out of Ukraine, assuming naively that that is the only motive for the recent drama, that the major decision makers have definitely failed, and by failed, it implies failed the human species, that there has been zero concern for long term consequences by the same people who were apparently concerned about climate change yesterday and imposing it on the civilians, but hold no responsibility or accountability today for the same thing. Think about this. If European civilians had opposed the wars in the Arabian countries, they wouldn't have had those displaced refugees and migrants as their next door neighbors. There would have never been a so called migrant crisis to whine about had they stopped their leaders from decimating those countries in the first place. And the same applies now. Of course, this doesn't exclude the tropical nations and the continents as a whole from suffering the consequences of what happens in Ukraine or Taiwan for that matter. To trigger factual memories, this is just a simple reminder that we may have segregated our entire species with illusionary borders and a colorful variety of flags, but we still live on just one planet, and it is a closed system. Earth doesn't care about our notions of divisive derisions and hate. We all depend on Earth's cyclic loops of pressure variations, ocean currents, and atmospheric currents. One unpredictable disruption affects the rest of the planet in a myriad of ways that most meteorologists, geologists, and earth scientists are already quite aware of. Is it a tragedy that this awareness is not expected of other citizens of the same planet and of the same species? It would be foolish of us to assume that the consequences of even a proxy war in Europe won't affect Tasmania in Australia or India or Chile. The very recent crisis in Lebanon has led to the tiny starving children trying to eat their own hands. If you can afford guns and wasting bombs during a global lockdown and pandemic, you definitely can afford delivery of essential foods to a country like Lebanon. If you can afford to move expensive artillery to the borders of a tiny nation, while the movement of citizens of Earth is completely restricted, you can definitely afford the logistics of moving essential cargo of food, water, and medicine to the countries that are actually in dire need right now. Think about it from a SETI perspective. If an alien species does exist, the intelligent kind that has been apparently watching us for a long time, would it even trouble itself in communicating with such a self destructive species like ours? We've been quite busy calling each other aliens just for an opportunity or an excuse to show vindictive and divisive hate and an excuse to kill each other. If an intelligent alien species does exist, it might as well be waiting for the human species to wipe itself off the planet, and maybe they just think of us as just a dumb species as the dodo.